Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. I'm Jose Machare, chairman of the Committee on Disaster Risk Management of the World Federation of Engineering Organizations. That is an institution that gathered more than 100 organizations, national and international organizations on engineering, representing more than 30 million engineers around the world. Today, we give you a warm welcome to this international webinar on institutional frameworks and public policies for resilient societies. This year, our committee has launched a book in last May, a book on engineering resilience in disaster risk management. And this for sustainable societies, for sustainable development. This book has 5 chapters. One of the important chapters deals with the institutional frameworks and the public policies. Why this? Because especially in developing countries, we have seen that often during and after a disaster, institutions don't know very well their role, one face to the other. So in our mission, that is to contribute to advance within the framework of the sustainable development goals of the United Nations, especially the goal number 11, that is resilient societies, resilient cities and societies. We would like to contribute sharing the best practices on every one of the subjects on disaster risk management, especially from the engineering point of view. So for today, we have 4 outstanding experts that are very willing to share with everybody the successful experiences in in every country as an example to what is possible and what is convenient as structure between institutions to establish a more powerful disaster risk management system at the country level. So for today, we have, I will present successively one by one. And we are going to start today with an overview of national resilience policy in Japan, and the future challenges. The speaker is Dr. Masamitsu Onishi from the Disaster Prevention Research Institute of Kyoto University from Japan. So, Dr. Onishi, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much for your very kind introduction. My name is Masamitsu Onishi. I'm working in a Disaster Prevention Research Institute in Kyoto University. So let me allow to share my slides. Can you see my screen? Okay.
Yes, it's okay.
Okay. So let me start my presentation. Today, I will talk about the overview of national resilience policy of Japan and the future challenges. Of course, I'm not the public officer in the national government, so I will talk from academic point of view and of a rough sketch of national resilience policy in Japan. And then the latter half of my presentation will talk the academic interest regarding the governance framework of the national resilience. So this is the contents. But the first is overview of national resilience policy in Japan, and the second is academic challenges, which I would touch upon the disaster risk and governance issues. And Japan suffered catastrophic disasters in 2011, Great East Japan earthquake, and international world kindly supported the recovery of Japan from the very catastrophic disasters. And actually, the term resilience is not so popular before this Great East Japan earthquake. So we can say that the resilience policy in Japan emerged by the trigger of this catastrophic earthquake. And since this Great East Japan earthquake, the national government started a discussion to set up a new basic act for national resilience, which was enacted in 2014. So the current resilience policy in Japan basically under this framework of Basic Act. And this Basic Act require the development of the basic plan for national resilience, which is developed by the national government and municipality, local government. The municipalities also have to develop the plan, regional plan for national resilience. I will not say in detail about this regional plan, but the national government strongly promoted, obliged to develop this regional plan for all the municipalities. And then national government is, I think they are making some incentive to make all municipalities, and national government open the data how many rates of the local municipality has already developed this regional resilience plan. So this is as for the July 1st of this year. So almost actually 38 prefectures of municipalities already developed 100% but still some of the prefecture are still municipality in some prefecture making some regional plan. So, and then by opening this data, the national government making incentive to make this regional plan rapidly. And this basic plan for national resilience, actually the national government in Japan defined the national resilience as protecting lives and property from catastrophic disasters. And even in the event of catastrophe, protecting the human lives, sustain the economy and society, minimizing the damage, rapid recovery and reconstruction. So all of the national resilience measures promoted the government is under this 4 category. And the expected catastrophic disaster in Japan is imminent one. It's a Nankai Trough mega earthquake, which is affected almost more than half area of Japan. This is the distribution seismic intensity of Nankai Trough mega earthquake, and which will cause the very severe tsunami as well. And then the number of victims is estimated at here 323,000 at worst, which is extremely bigger than the Great East Japan earthquake. And then Tokyo metropolitan earthquake also the expected in the near future, which is also the bring a severe, more severe damage than the Great Eastern Japan earthquake. So these two, I think it's the major target of a national resilience policy in Japan at the beginning. However, particularly 2018 is a little bit unique year because the Japan suffered several very severe disasters. Typhoon Jebi. This is Kansai International Airport, completely inundated due to the high tide, and then torrential rain in Western Japan, and earthquake as well. So after that, the government promoted the 3-year emergency measures for disaster prevention. But anyway, the government are putting the budget, a lot of budget for disaster management issues. And then now, from 2021, 5 years accelerated measure for disaster prevention, also the putting a lot of the budget for this. So frankly speaking, the government deemed this national resilience issues very seriously, and putting a lot of budget to the disaster prevention. And then let me explain some of the some popular words recently, which one is jizen bosai, mean the proactive disaster prevention. Which means avoiding losses to the social economy due to the delay in taking disaster prevention measures in advance. So now the disaster is not a mere risk. Maybe the disaster is 100% occurs. The question is when we taking the action. So now the Japanese society realized that the early taking a measure is very, very important. to avoid the loss. Due to the time interest, I will explain briefly, but the Japan, this is a transition of RRD budget for disaster risk reduction. The Japan invested the R&D budget, allocated R&D budget after big some disaster events. So this means that there's a proverb that locking the stable door after the horse has bolted. So the important thing is that taking the action before disaster occur, not after the disaster. That is very important. So yes, this is a summary, but let me skip due to the time interest. So this is the second topic of my presentation, my academic interest too. So we have the word that self-help, mutual help, public help. And then these all three is important. Maybe nobody cannot argue on this. And actually, the former Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga used this phrase for this for political LDP leader election campaign. And so here, self-help, mutual help, but public help. But actually, this slogan was criticized because usually, if the government or politicians say this, self-help, mutual help, and public health important, usually in their context, self and mutual help is important. Okay, if the government or public officer says. But from the community point of view, they always claim that public help is important. So they always argue self and mutual help is important. On the other hand, public help is important. So this word is maybe nobody cannot argue on this, but as a result, the responsibility disappeared. So this is, I think, it's a current situation in Japan by using these phrases, popular phrases. And this one is very interesting survey that a bit complicated. The rate of yes answer by resident and local municipalities emergency management staff for activities for which they recognize local resident and community should be responsible. So, for example, this safety check and the rescue of local resident, the resident recognize that, oh, this is the local community's responsibilities. But the government see that, oh, this work is the local the resident community's responsibility. So this means that the government is, this case is the government more think that resilient community should be responsible for. And then this one is a very big gap here, voluntary evacuation shelter management and cooperation. See, this one resident, resident regards, oh, this is the government work. We should not do that. We cannot do that. But the government considers that, oh, this is a community's work. So this is a very big gap. So we can see the some big gap between in recognition of responsibility between the residents and the government. And in line with this context, the Japan is now promoting a new flood risk management policy, and then it is called the River Basin Disaster Resilience Sustainability by all. So important thing is not only the administrator of the river, the all stakeholders in a river basin is some have to work somehow. So by all is the most important point. For example, the paddy field dam, before the big flood, the owner of the paddy field put this kind of the board here, so to reduce the water go into the river. So this is one of the example. And but actually, this is challenges. The government emphasizes importance of voluntary action in different community. And paternalistic government say, "Oh, do not rely on government," but the government say very from the top down like this. So this is kind of double bind situation, which means a dilemma in communication with individual relationships to a more reciprocally conflicting message. So how we can overcome this kind of a problem? So this is the last slide. I'm working in some with the residents to develop a wide area evacuation for large volcanic eruptions in Japan. And finally, I think this is a starting point. Protect one's own life by oneself. So say self-help is most important. But of course, everything cannot solve the problem by self, by oneself. So, and then now I'm as an expert working with the residents, how we can do, what we can do. And then of course, we have to some request to the government too. So, but the expert should work with the resident. This is very important. We do not say, you should do this, you should do this, but I will work this. And then I am doing this as a practical research. I always mention that this project owner is a resident. So resident take the lead. And but on the other hand, we cannot solve this problem and immediately. So we need a long time to solve this problem, or we always continue to think about it. So continuity is power. So this is the one way to solve the dilemma of this kind of a self-mutual and public help dilemmas. So thank you very much. This is the end of my presentation. Sorry for my long talk.
Very good. Thank you very much, Dr. Onishi. It's a very interesting presentation and particular points too. Please, I would like to mention, excuse me. Okay, that I have to greet participants that are connected with now with the webinar from Mexico, Colombia, from Hong Kong, China, and Japan, and also from Peru right now. Greeting for all of you. Thank you for accompanying. And now I'm going to present the next speaker, Dr. Norlan Garcia, that comes from the Secretariat for Integrated Risk Management and Civil Protection from Mexico. And he is going to present us the public policies for resilience building in Mexico City. Norlan, please.
Hola, ¿qué tal? Muy buenas tardes y días a todos. Gracias, doctor José Macharé, por la presentación y al Comité de Gestión de Riesgo de Desastres del World Federation Engineering Organization por la invitación a la Ciudad de México a través de mi persona a mostrarles un poco cuáles han sido las políticas para la construcción de resiliencia en la Ciudad de México. Me voy a permitir compartir pantalla y platicarles cómo hemos venido realizando acciones que puedan incentivar la resiliencia en la Ciudad de México. Como muchos saben, la Ciudad de México es una ciudad multirriesgo, donde inundaciones y terremotos son fenómenos que afectan recurrentemente e históricamente a esta ciudad. Entonces, ¿cómo o por dónde comenzar para poder construir resiliencia? Pues primero nos hacemos las siguientes preguntas. ¿Cómo se comprende el riesgo de la Ciudad de México? Es decir, una ciudad multirriesgo, una ciudad que es frecuentemente afectada por sismos e inundaciones y que históricamente estos dos fenómenos han modificado el desarrollo de la misma ciudad. También, ¿con qué capacidades de reducción de riesgos deberíamos contar para una ciudad con dinámicas complejas? Esto es, también recordemos que la Ciudad de México y su zona conurbada alberga a cerca de 20 millones de personas y muchas poblaciones se encuentran en zonas de riesgos. Entonces, ante ello, también nos debemos de hacer la pregunta de cómo prepararnos mejor ante deslizamientos, sismos e inundaciones, incendios forestales e incluso fenómenos provocados por el hombre, como los fenómenos de tipo químico que en ciudades en desarrollo son una constante amenaza para los ciudadanos. Para ello hemos en la Ciudad de México trabajado en 6 ejes de acción para tener una ciudad más preparada, para tener una ciudad más sostenible y para ser una ciudad más resiliente. En primera instancia, hemos reconocido al concepto de la resiliencia desde el marco normativo. La Constitución Política de la Ciudad de México tiene dentro de diferentes artículos el concepto de resiliencia como una forma de poderse recuperar y transformar y mejorar de la forma más rápida posible ante un evento de tipo catastrófico o ante eventos que se van presentando poco a poco a través del tiempo. Por ejemplo, el fenómeno de la sequía. Asimismo, dentro de la Ley de Gestión Integral de Riesgos y Protección Civil de la Ciudad de México, el concepto de resiliencia juega un papel preponderante, pues en ella sentamos las bases de política para que la población se pueda recuperar de forma eficiente y en menor tiempo ante eventos disruptivos como sería un desastre o emergencia. Entonces, lo primero que hemos hecho en la Ciudad de México es organizarnos para la resiliencia y tener este marco normativo. Asimismo, desde el año 2016 existe una estructura organizacional que generan las políticas de resiliencia en la ciudad. Hay 2 instrumentos fundamentales. Una es la Estrategia de Resiliencia de la Ciudad de México, que fue elaborada en el 2016. Y la otra es el Consejo de Resiliencia de la Ciudad de México, el cual se instituyó en el año de 2019. Creemos que estas dos estructuras El primero, un documento con una hoja de ruta muy específico para saber cuáles van a ser las acciones de resiliencia en el corto, en el mediano y largo plazo, y un consejo de resiliencia donde se reúnen los principales actores del sector público, privado y social, en el cual generamos sinergias para que los proyectos de resiliencia puedan fortalecerse en la ciudad. Estos dos mecanismos son mecanismos de vinculación y participación entre diferentes actores. Dicho sea de paso, la Ciudad de México, el año pasado, en diciembre de 2021, fue catalogada por las Naciones Unidas y específicamente por la Oficina de Reducción de Riesgos de Desastres de la ONU como un nodo resiliente. Es decir, que derivado de las políticas de resiliencia instruidas en la Ciudad de México, nos permite generar capacidades en otros gobiernos locales para que las buenas prácticas que desde la Ciudad de México hemos estado impulsando se puedan replicar en otros gobiernos locales. Parte importante del conocimiento y de la construcción de resiliencia es el acceso a la información. Para ello, hemos generado y adquirido infraestructura para almacenar y publicar información mediante el Atlas de Riesgos de la Ciudad de México. Un sistema de información geográfica que le permite prácticamente a cualquier ciudadano saber cuáles son los peligros a los que se enfrenta, ya sea él como persona, su comunidad o su territorio. El comprender el riesgo nos permite generar las medidas de mitigación para poder reducir el riesgo de desastre. Este atlas de riesgo de la Ciudad de México está constituido por diferentes módulos temáticos para crear escenarios de riesgo y importante también es el monitoreo de fenómenos naturales que afectan recurrentemente a la ciudad. Asimismo, es indispensable la creación de instrumentos de coordinación con diferentes actores, tanto para la atención de emergencias y desastres, como para la prevención de diversos fenómenos. La Ciudad de México ha establecido el plan de emergencia sísmica como un plan que permite saber a cada actor, ya sea público, privado, social y de la academia, cuáles son sus responsabilidades en caso de una emergencia de desastre de esta índole. Asimismo, hemos trabajado con otro tipo de protocolos de actuación en caso de sismo, pero con el componente de la pandemia que está ocurriendo en estos momentos. Asimismo, hemos creado protocolos interinstitucionales, es decir, con otras instituciones para la atención de lluvias e inundaciones, fenómenos que son recurrentemente, que se presentan recurrentemente en esta ciudad. Las políticas de prevención de riesgos, el atlas de riesgo y todas las políticas para la construcción de resiliencia inciden en la planeación del desarrollo, ya que es importante que, por ejemplo, el Plan General de Gobierno de la Ciudad de México cuente dentro de su estructura con una visión de reducción de riesgos de desastre. No podemos seguir generando riesgos a través del desarrollo mismo de los gobiernos locales o los países. Asimismo, es importante también que en los planes de ordenamiento territorial podamos incluir el componente de riesgo para identificar las zonas que no son propensas a la construcción de nuevos asentamientos humanos. Con ello, se está evitando la construcción de nuevos riesgos para poder inclusive también mitigar los riesgos existentes que tenemos en la Ciudad de México. Finalmente, dentro de esta planeación del desarrollo, sabemos que el aspecto de cambio climático es sumamente importante. El cambio climático es una realidad que está afectando a diversas ciudades de América Latina y del mundo. Pero en el caso de América Latina, siendo una de las regiones más urbanizadas del mundo, el cambio climático tendrá efectos sumamente diferenciados en las ciudades, con lo que los fenómenos de tipo hidrometeorológico serán más recurrentes y con mayor fuerza. Ante ello, hemos también trabajado junto con otros actores los programas de acción climática de la Ciudad de México con un componente de adaptación. Es decir, crear planes que puedan mitigar el riesgo de fenómenos hidrometeorológicos adaptándonos al territorio. Finalmente, hemos desarrollado capacidades técnicas tanto para la población como para el gobierno. Dentro de la población hemos estado realizando intensas campañas de capacitación en comunidades y colonias de la Ciudad de México. Como bien decía nuestro amigo, el doctor, el primer ponente, es necesario que la población esté sumamente preparada para afrontar directamente las consecuencias de una emergencia o desastre. Por otro lado, para el gobierno, hemos también elaborado programas especiales de protección civil que puedan ayudar a gestionar los riesgos de desastres que se suscitan en la Ciudad de México. También hemos hecho acciones con diversos actores para lograr una ciudad más resiliente. Hemos establecido insumos de consulta técnica como libros donde se aborda el problema de riesgos, de desastres que tiene la Ciudad de México, pero también las políticas de resiliencia que pueden ayudar a recuperarse y a salir más fortalecidos ante una emergencia o desastre. Hemos realizado y difundido el conocimiento tanto para el público en general como para instituciones especializadas. Todo ello, todas estas acciones de gobierno, siempre con un enfoque de género, que como sabemos, los desastres afectan de forma dispar a hombres y mujeres, con lo que la visión de género es sumamente trascendental en todas las políticas de gobierno. Hemos, como ya lo dije anteriormente, generado mecanismos de participación como el Consejo de Resiliencia de la Ciudad de México y hemos entablado cooperación internacional tanto dentro de la estrategia MSR 2030, Making Resilient Cities, una campaña muy exitosa de las Naciones Unidas para lograr comunidades más resilientes, además de otros cursos como el curso de evaluación de necesidades de recuperación post-disaster, Post-Disaster Needs Assessment, en el cual buscamos que el gobierno esté preparado para hacer primeras evaluaciones rápidas para evaluar los efectos de los desastres y poder con ello solventar las necesidades más urgentes de la población. Por mi parte sería todo y muchísimas gracias por el espacio.
Thank you very much, Dr. Garcia. Very good presentation. We have learned a lot, and we are able to compare now to different ways, but with the same objectives between Japan and Mexico. For the public, we can use the chat log, please, for questions, and we will try to answer most of what is possible at the end. We have a round table after the presentations. Now, please let me introduce the next talk that is given by Dr. Maria Pecce from University of Naples, Federico II from Italy. She is not directly connected because it's too late in the night in Europe, but she would give its talk by a video, and the title is Seismic Risk Management and Emergency Preparedness in Italy. So please go with the video.
Good afternoon to all. I am Maria Rosaria Pecce, Professor of Structures at the University of Naples, Federico II in Italy. Firstly, I want to thank you and Barbara Polidoro of ARUP for the invitation to this webinar that is very interesting in order to evaluate the efficiency of the risk management and resilience of our country through the knowledge of the organization of other countries. My presentation deals with the risk management and the resilience in Italy in case of seismic events, but many features are general and can be significant also for other environmental and anthropic risk. In fact, in Italy, we have various fragilities due to a territory not extended but articulated in areas with specific and various peculiarities. We have water deficit, but also floods, landslides, but also forest fires, seaquakes and volcanic phenomena, but especially earthquakes that currently are probable on the entire country. You can see the map of the various seismic events and their distribution along the country. Many earthquakes occurred in the last 50 years with victims and economic loss. 8 main events with the loss of 150,000 euro and more than 5,000 victims occurred. But a milestone is the earthquake of Campania Basilicata. You see, the regions, the name is from the regions where occurred, but is also well known as Irpinia earthquake because the catastrophic events in Italy are important, especially because they marked the most important changes in the organization of the risk management. To better understand the seismic risk management, the organization of the seismic risk management, it is important to remember that the seismic risk is the product of hazard, vulnerability and exposition. According to Italian code, the seismic hazard is measured by peak ground acceleration, and the intensity is higher along the Apennine Mountains that across the center and south of the country. Vulnerability is the peculiarity of the structures related to their weak performance under seismic actions, as the organization of the bearing elements, the lack of ductility, and so on. Exposure measures the gravity of the consequences of the construction collapse due to its use, as for example, number of occupants and value of contents. The hazard of the country, of Italy, evolved according to the seismic events, arriving to extend to the entire country with high intensity for a large area. In the slide we can see the map of the area of the seismic areas during the time. In the past, the intensity of earthquake was measured through consequences, but currently the peak ground acceleration is used to define periculosity. The evolution of the hazard is important because this hazard increases also the vulnerability of the structures, because many constructions were designed and constructed with rules not adequate to the seismic demand. The first important evolution of the seismic code was in 1982, but unfortunately few constructions have been realized after 1982. As you see, only 5% of measured buildings and 15% of reinforced concrete buildings. Furthermore, the degradation of structures and presence of a large number of historic or ancient buildings increases the seismic vulnerability of the Italian heritage. In this frame of the country, also the civil protection evolved and improved when a catastrophic event occurred. The milestone of its evolution is the Virginia earthquake that occurred on 23rd November 1980. In fact, before it, the law of 1970 defined the natural disaster considering the extraordinary technical methods and machines are required, but resources were police and military. The catastrophic earthquake demonstrated the weak organization of the rescue, and many alive persons dead under the ruins, waiting and crying to be saved. Therefore, the government decided to nominate an high minister to manage the emergency, and after the lesson of the Irpinia earthquake, the Department of Civil Protection was born, but starting its work without economic power. Nevertheless, the importance of the problem, the 10 years were necessary to approve the law with the rules for civil protection. In 1992, the law was approved, changing the role of the civil protection from the management of the emergency to a more comprehensive concept of all-around citizen protection. Three fundamental insights that are respected currently drive the civil protection system. An effective civil protection system must pre-exist the event and cannot be improvised in an emergency context on the basis of news arriving from an affected area. The need for a civil protection presidium, previously identified and located in all Italian municipalities, which according to the principle of subsidiarity are responsibly called upon to work every day for the safety of their citizens, not only in emergency conditions. Organized voluntarism should be involved to ensure the necessary capacity for intervention during the most serious events. After this starting point, further disaster contributed to the evolution of the civil protection. You can see the most important events. A first decentralization regional government was applied after earthquake of Umbria Marche in center of Italy in 1997, but also due to Sarno flood in 1998. In 2002, the Molise earthquake with the collapse of a school and 20 children dead make an innovative approach to the civil protection, because the civil protection emanated a technical law with rules for construction design that was an important and innovative role. This law opened the way to the new code published in 2008 with the 2 years transition period and inspired to Eurocodes. In 2009, the earthquake of L'Aquila marked a new important step because after the emergency, a project of seismic insulated buildings around the L'Aquila city were approved and realized instead of the usual provisional houses used to expect the intervention of the existing buildings. The Emilia earthquake focused the attention on the loss of industrial buildings. So, the National Civil Protection Service operates at the local, regional and central levels. The government intervenes only where and when territorial authorities fail to manage with the emergency. 3 levels of emergencies are defined. Type A, emergencies can be dealt with through intervention and measures put in place at the local level, therefore of individual municipalities. Type B, emergencies by nature or extent require the coordinated intervention of several agencies or administrations and are managed at territorial level by the regions. And the third level, that is type C emergencies, require the immediate intervention of the national level of the civil protection system because the resources available in the territory are not sufficient and adequate. The new enlarged mission of the civil protection is comprehensive of actions for knowledge improvement, promoting research activities, study of classes of buildings and so on, but also actions to reduce vulnerability and exposure were organized by indirect actions in design or plans, but also direct actions as intervention on constructions. But more innovative is the wide action of sensitization of the citizen that was started in the last 10 years through street events, but also formation of technicians to be able to collect data after earthquake events, so that they can use the compilation of post-earthquake forms. In 2011, another innovative approach of civil protection was introduced because the concept of limit condition for emergency was established to define the minimum resilience of some services that have to be assured after an earthquake. When almost all urban functions, including residences, are failed, the following ones have to be preserved: the operability of most of the strategic functions for the emergency, like hospitals, their connectivity, their accessibility with respect to the territorial context, for example, strategical bridges. It is the resilience that has to be assured and started by the help of voluntaries with incentives. Many funds were addressed to local administrations by the civil protection with various actions to reduce the seismic risk. Currently, also for private buildings, there are funds. Civil protection is articulated in a department, but other bodies, administrative or technical or military, as fire brigades, are connected with civil protection. You see in the slide all this type of bodies, especially for management of emergency. But in 2003, the competent centers and universities were connected with the civil protection, improving activities of research and technological transfer. This is another innovative step of the civil protection in Italy. The Competence Center Lewis network of the University Laboratories of Seismic Engineering was born. Lewis provides scientific, organizational, technical and financial support to member universities. The consortium is the scientific interlocutor of the various bodies of the national government, districts, provinces, municipalities, and public and private institutions. The consortium is not-profit and based in Naples at the Department of Structures for Engineering and Architecture of the University Federico II, my department. Lewis collaborates to the management of the post-emergency of L'Aquila, collaborated to the management of the post-emergency of L'Aquila earthquake. Many research projects were funded and are still funded by the civil protection to Lewis, involving more than 200 researchers. About 60 million euros were given to Lewis by civil protection. The research is aimed to improve solutions for prevention, mitigation, management of seismic risk. But currently, the Lewis mission enlarged to the safety of structures, more in general, with a big project on infrastructures. So, after this excursus on the civil protection in Italy and the real current resilience situation in case of seismic events, in conclusion, the risk and emergency management in Italy is entrusted to civil protection that evolved according to catastrophic events, arriving to a current organization that sees to research, prevention, that look to research, prevention, dissemination, funding, management, improving the resilience of the community, and giving to research and knowledge a key role in the security of society. And this point is very important because it is a perspective of a continuous evolution of the civil protection and resilience of the country. I finished my presentation and I thank you for the attention.
Thank you very much for sending this interesting contribution to Dr. Maria Pecce from Italy. We are happy to give greetings also to people from the international disaster risk management community. Greetings to Engineer Gustavo Ayala from Mexico that has contributed to the committee in previous opportunities. Engineer Carlos Bayón from Bolivia, cordial saludo. Iracemar Alcántara too. Thank you for your assistance today. Your attendance, sorry. Now I have to announce that our leader of the working group on institutional frameworks, Dr. Miles Lind from New Zealand, has had some problems to connect directly. However, in the running, he has sent us the presentation through a video. And please, I would ask to put the track now, a video from Dr. Miles Lind from the Institution of Public Works Engineering, Australasia, in New Zealand.
Greetings and hello. Today I will talk about coordinated incident response management through a case study of New Zealand. At its highest level, disaster risk management operates as a social process through four interlinked components, namely hardware, software, financial support, and human capital. These four interlinked components are a complex system of responses provided by many organisations, including government agencies, scientific and academic entities, non-government organisations, and private companies. The degree of institutionality of DRM reflects in the extent to which a society understands these processes and, importantly, trusts its institutions. A reduction in community vulnerability is the reason countries seek to institutionalise disaster risk management. That's because through institutionalizing disaster risk management, communities are more readily able and consistently practiced at reducing risks. As a consequence, communities are better able to recover more quickly from natural hazard emergencies. New Zealand is a small island nation located on the Pacific Ring of Fire off the eastern coast of Australia. Being on the Pacific Ring of Fire, New Zealand is geologically active. This is because it sits across the boundary between the Australian and the Pacific tectonic plates. These moving plates cause huge forces that have shaped the New Zealand landscape. As these plates collide, rocks are being pushed up, creating hills and mountains, including the Southern Alps, which runs the length of the country. The Alpine Fault is a very complex active boundary with the plates sliding along each other, into each other, and under and over each other. Every year, New Zealand experiences around 15,000 earthquakes. About 100 to 150 of these earthquakes are large enough to be felt by people. And in the last 200 years, New Zealand has experienced over 170 earthquakes over a magnitude 6. Like other countries that have a higher recurrence probability of a natural hazard event, New Zealand has a federal government-led institutional framework that embeds disaster risk management responses into the community's everyday life. New Zealand's Civil Defence Organisation, which in its earliest form dates back to the 1930s, has had the task of responding to natural event emergencies. It was not until 1959, however, that the establishment for the Ministry of Civil Defence formalised earlier ad hoc attempts to deal with natural disasters. The Civil Defence Act came into effect in 1962, which formalised national administration, civil defence regions, rules around the declaration of national and major emergencies, and the duties and powers of local authorities. The development of the ministry and the evolution of its role over these years illustrates the changes in both the public perception of the threat posed by natural emergencies and the way they have been dealt with. New Zealand's early civil defence organisation and legislation were based on overseas models, particularly the British models. However, today's modern approach in New Zealand is based on many international systems that recognises the benefits of common training standards, regular reviews, and international compatibility. The current version of this is provided for by the Government of New Zealand through the 2002 Civil Defence Emergency Management Act. The CDEM Act creates a legislated nationwide framework within which New Zealand people can prepare for, deal with, and recover more quickly from local, regional, and national events. Also, New Zealand has a very stringent building strength regulations as well as embedded disaster risk management systems. This means New Zealand is more generally prepared for and consequently better able to recover from more quickly natural hazard emergencies. The National Emergency Management Agency, NEMA, is the government's headquarters for emergency management in New Zealand. NEMA is an operationally autonomous agency with its own chief executive within the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet, and separate to the Department of Internal Affairs. NEMA's key functions to the Department of the Prime Minister and Cabinet are steward, operator, and assurer of the New Zealand emergency management system. Specifically, NEMA is required to provide leadership in reducing risks, being prepared for, responding to, and recovering from emergencies. New Zealand has a national disaster resilience strategy, which outlines the vision and long-term goals for the civil defence emergency management in New Zealand. The NDRS plan sets out what the government of New Zealand require in respect to New Zealand being resilient as a country and what it expects to achieve and improve on over the next 10 years. The NDRS is supported by the National Civil Defence Emergency Management Plan. The CDEM plan, also a government document, sets out the roles and responsibilities for everyone involved in reducing risks and preparing for, responding to, and recovering from emergencies. This includes central government, local government, lifeline utilities, emergency services, and non-government organisations. First developed in 1998, the Coordinated Incident Management System, or CIMS, represents New Zealand's official framework for operational delivery of incident management and coordination across the responding agencies to an emergency or hazard event. CIMS describes in detail how New Zealand agencies and organisations, that being the Fire Department, the police, hospitals, schools, border control, defence, local councils and others, coordinate, command and control incident response of any scale, how the response will be structured and the relationships between the respective CIMS functions and between the levels of response. Importantly, throughout New Zealand, there are regular training and specific hazard event practice sessions for responding agencies and the community to continually develop and grow their available capability and capacity of the response system for when it might be needed in the future. CIMS is an element of the New Zealand emergency management doctrine that agencies use to manage incidents. Doctrine is the body of principles and practices that guide an agency's actions. Doctrine informs the scope, material, and type of training required. Training is then designed and delivered to best support an operational response. New Zealand experience suggests that doctrine is not applied during an operational response if the training programs are inappropriate. An important feedback loop is ensuring that the lessons from the operational response are used to update and revise the doctrine. The core foundations of that the institutionalization of DRM in New Zealand is based on the recognition that where you have people marginalized, you will often leave people behind and the community will be more adversely affected. In response, the institutionalized approach in New Zealand seeks to support and protect the community through central government leadership at the highest level, written into legislation, which has a strong community focus. An agile and flexible event response framework that can be used for small to large responses from a local incident level through to a national disaster level. Well-trained, coordinated and supported response agencies and local community members through practiced scenario events, highlighting the importance of the inclusion of Indigenous peoples in the response and recovery. A key aspect of the New Zealand approach is its foundation of DRM mitigation policies and activities. These foundations are built around the core aspects, regulations, qualifications, and simulations. Regulations. Building quality standards, mandatory building system requirements, such as fire management systems, continuously improving seismic standards, and government set timeframes to implement those standards. Regular building warrant of fitness requirements and safety condition inspection requirements. Qualifications are to be at a Washington Accord level engineering, combined with national registers of engineers who are qualified and have the experience to undertake specialist engineering work, particularly structural and building foundation and geotechnical work, traffic safety work, and fire engineering. Simulations, regular use and refinement of computer models nationally and regionally to identify and map zones of vulnerable land, earthquake effects, and flood hazard risks. It has been recognised internationally that communication throughout the community is a key factor in reducing the impact of emergency events on the community. Where community leaders have not accepted the advice of the specialist technical experts, such as scientists, engineers, and doctors, community impact and fatality rates will generally be higher. The key lessons from New Zealand on increasing social system response and resilience to stressor events include: community leadership needs to be based on a system of public trust in the communications of the leaders, and it is difficult to have or restore community trust when disaster risk management messages become political. The focus of communications to the community requires the placement of the health and well-being of the people at the top of the communication priority. More successful responses to stressor events requires leaders to take the people with them. Having public health and well-being as the key priority supports this outcome. If the communications are not risk-informed, they do not best serve the community. Employing the best non-political expert advice available pre, during, and post, i.e. geotechnical, medical, flood, other risk, hazard mapping, earthquake modeling, is essential. It is important that leaders and response agencies communicate clearly what they know and admit what they do not know. When dealing with technical topics, such as something like storm surge, language that the community in general can understand is important, including how the public will be impacted. Accurate forecasts of events need to be communicated in terms that clearly set out the scale and extents of any public impact. The most critical element of risk event communication is trust. Asking people to please stay home or leave you home from a government official to the community requires significant trust. These communications are best made on a factual basis on which the government is putting the response measures into place. Thank you. Like other countries that have a higher recurrence probability of natural hazard events, New Zealand has a federal government-led institutional framework that embeds disaster risk management responses into the community's everyday life. It is based on a similar system that recognises that common standards of training, regular reviews, and international compatibility are essential. The process to institutionalise DRM throughout New Zealand has been based on nearly 100 years of investment, independent of the leadership of our country. The leadership of DRM is through a well-funded national agency that has direct engagement with the Prime Minister. During times of response to natural and other disaster events, ensuring and retaining community trust is essential. Thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation of Dr. Lind. So we have some minutes after these interesting presentations to exchange some thoughts, worries and the public is invited to send some questions. I would like to inform we have a question in the chat log from Engineer Hugo Guerrero. But this is about the infrastructure on water systems, and I recommend that Hugo to report to the video of our precedent webinar. The last week we tried extensively on this, and there are the answer for you on the flexible pipes for the water systems in the cities, especially for cities subject to seismic hazard. So there is a question for Dr. Onishi, and it deals with how the private sector is involved in the arrangement of the disaster risk management system in Japan.
Okay, thank you very much for your very good question. The private sector involvement in the disaster risk management. Related to my research interest, because I'm a civil engineer, so I'm interested in the role of a construction industry for the emergency response after the disaster. And usually the local municipality or even the central, the public work office, it have a so-called agreement, cooperative agreement with the construction industry association in local prefecture level. And so if some earthquake or flood disaster occurs, the local municipality or the public work office request to work on emergency reconstruction work for local the construction industry association, and the local industry association appointed the which local contractor will work on which site. So actually, this is the in terms of the emergency response, the local contractor are working under this framework, but there's a problem because the emergency response work is usually the little bit risky in terms of the safety. And then the local construction industry is really, you know, due to the constraint, or, you know, labor safety is very, very important. If this company, you know, have an accident in a labor, this is penalized. And then a local contractor is lose to get the business in the future opportunity. So, but you know, this disaster response is a little bit risky work compared to the usual work. So I think this is a very some, you know, this is a matter of the responsibility. You know, the situation is different from the usual work and the disaster response work, but the system is the same. So I think this kind of, you know, the different some institutional system for disaster risk response is very important. Otherwise, now the local contractor takes a very heavy burden. So this is my research interest. Mm-hmm. Yeah, and of course, the other in terms of the other context, for example, the convenience store, you know, or logistic company is also very active working in disaster risk response. This is contribute to the, in terms of the some, you know, kind of social responsibility, you know, yes. And yes, this good reputation to contribute good reputation.
Yes. Yes, it's clear. Now that you are here, we have a question from Iracema Alcantara that asks if the communities and scientists participated in the elaboration of the basic act that you mentioned at the beginning, the basic act for national resilience.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, unfortunately, the basic act for national resilience is totally 100% developed by the government. that is a problem.
Yeah,
yeah, not, there's a huge gap.
It's not rare. It's quite frequent, I think. Now, this you have raised very much interest. We have in the room we have Dr. Xu Tang from China, from IRDR, and member of the Committee on Disaster Risk Management. Also greetings to Dr. Jenny Jung, that is accompanying us. Dr. Tang asked the following. As mentioned by Mr. Onishi and Mr. Lin, communication is extremely important in building a resilient society. My question is, how could effective communication procedure be established with current institutional framework for DRM and climate change adaptation? How to include these communication procedures?
This is the question to me?
Yes, if you catch it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah. I think the national resilience, for example, basic policy, a basic plan of this government provided plan is basically important, you know, but this is the necessary condition, but sufficient condition. And so I'm always thinking what I can do as an academic, so expert. So in some presentation we were some participatory. Participatory is a very common keyword for in this context. But the participatory means usually the resident participatory in a public policy. But I always think, as I mentioned in my presentation, at least this is my understanding or my way of thinking. I participate in a community. I participate as an expert. I think this is very important because if I enter the community as I'm an expert, my comment is always right. This does not work. So yeah. I participate in the community. So I think this is very important. As I mentioned, finally, the community is, I think it's a core of this kind of governance system. So I always respect the community, and then the expert or outsider work together with them. Even the public government officer also should do like this. So, and then from this point of view, I facilitating the communication between the community and the local government too. Yes, then I always understand it. Main player is the community. Thank you very much.
Thank you. I have a couple of questions, a precise question for Dr. Norlan Garcia, please. One is, who organize and manage the risk atlas that is now in place for Mexico City? Who organization? What organization, sorry?
Muchas gracias por la pregunta, doctor. El Atlas de Riesgos de la Ciudad de México está bajo resguardo, tutela y además de responsable de la actualización a la Secretaría de Gestión Integral de Riesgos y Protección Civil de la Ciudad de México. Ella es quien, de acuerdo a la Ley de Protección Civil, tiene dentro de sus facultades la actualización y el desarrollo del Atlas de Riesgos de la Ciudad de México. Actualmente el Atlas tiene más de 1000 capas de información sobre los peligros y vulnerabilidades que hay en la Ciudad de México, y creo que es un reto también. El conocimiento de los riesgos exige una importante actualización permanente de la información, y ese es todo un reto en una ciudad bastante compleja. Además de ello, y aludiendo, si me permite, doctor, responder una pregunta de parte del panel, me preguntan que cuál es el reto que tiene la Ciudad de México para convertirse en una ciudad resiliente. Creo que yo siempre he dicho que es un proceso que nunca se alcanza, es un proceso que tenemos que construir diariamente, y si me lo preguntan a mí, es, además del conocimiento de los riesgos, es tener inversiones públicas de dinero para empezar a mitigar los riesgos existentes, además de no descuidar los riesgos futuros. Creo que en eso necesitamos avanzar, políticas serias. En el caso, por ejemplo, de la Ciudad de México, el riesgo sísmico es un tema que siempre está latente. Es por ello que debemos de iniciar políticas públicas para reducir los riesgos en los más de 1.2 millones de inmuebles que existen en la ciudad. Entonces, una política de reducción de riesgos en inmuebles sería uno de los grandes pasos que esta ciudad necesita para ser más resiliente. Gracias.
Yes, and the second question in point is who does the Resilience Council that you mentioned depends on? From what organization?
Es un consejo que también está bajo, la Secretaría de Gestión Integral de Riesgos de la Ciudad de México, y fue diseñado precisamente para que no solo la Secretaría de Gestión emprenda proyectos para fortalecer la resiliencia, sino diversos sectores en el ámbito del medio ambiente, en el ámbito del agua, de la resiliencia hídrica, en el ámbito de la resiliencia al sistema de movilidad, en el ámbito territorial, urbano. Es por ello que este consejo aglutina a muchas secretarías de la Ciudad de México para poder establecer resiliencia de forma transversal en distintos aspectos.
Yes. By the way, because in your country is like ours, we have a question from engineer Jorge Cuenca from Cusco University. Is that in the Latin American countries, in general, the urban population from the big cities is more, has some stronger capacity for resilience. However, how to improve the resilience in the rural zones, rural minor cities that has less access to the information?
Sí, totalmente, doctor. Creo que es un reto que tienen muchas ciudades. Recordemos que cerca del 40% de la población en América Latina habita en ciudades. Para el año 2050 se espera que el porcentaje de población sea de un 70% de la población que habita en ciudades. Es un proceso que desde en la Ciudad de México estamos fomentando la construcción de brigadas comunitarias de gestión de riesgos y protección civil. Vamos a los diferentes barrios, a los diferentes espacios de hábitat de las personas, donde les damos capacitación e información para poder, para que ellos puedan detectar sus riesgos en su entorno. Es un proceso lento, pero seguro. Es un proceso que demanda y exige mucho tiempo, pero lo tenemos que hacer. Llevarle información a esas comunidades.
Yes. Please, I go to Dr. Onishi. There is a figure that has shocked to all of us, is 323,000 human losses in the worst scenario for the Nankai Trough earthquake. So the question, this comes from Iracema too, is what is the most significant driver to have these losses? Is the characteristic of the infrastructure exposed, or what is the main factor?
It's obviously tsunami. Yeah. Looking at the Great Eastern Japan earthquake, actually the victims due to the for example, building corruption, particularly direct damage due to the earthquake is not so much. So most of the causality is come from the tsunami disaster.
What is your opinion about the Great Walls built as for the tsunami protection? Your personal view?
My personal, actually, this is a very important question. But at least in some area, the expected the tsunami toll is too high to prevent this kind of worst case scenario in terms of the money. And then of course local people criticize due to the landscape, so they cannot see the sea totally see the wall. So yes. This is also very mental stress for them. So I think it is not realistic to prevent the total worst case tsunami scenario. So actually in Japan, we introduced the system like a level 1 expectation, level 2 expectation. And the level 1 is the from the economic point of view, this is a reasonable expectation, but the level 2 is a worst case. Yes. So this level 2 is protect the life by evacuation.
Yes, it's hard. Still, we have some exchange with Norland. Norland, please. What is the main challenge of Ciudad de Mexico to really become a resilient city? You are in the way, but what is the main challenge?
Yo creo que uno de los grandes retos es el riesgo sísmico que existe en la ciudad. Tenemos que ir generando las políticas públicas para la reducción de este riesgo mediante el análisis de una política pública que evalúe la salud de los inmuebles, de los 1.2 millones de inmuebles que están actualmente en la Ciudad de México. Tenemos un reglamento de construcción muy robusto, muy bueno, pero también tenemos que vigilar aquellas construcciones que no están hechas antes de este reglamento de construcción que se afinó por ahí del año de 1985. Creemos también que faltan inversiones para poder mitigar los riesgos existentes y evitar los riesgos que se vayan generando por las causas naturales del crecimiento de las ciudades. Creo que es un camino que se tiene que construir lentamente y sobre todo generar las políticas públicas indispensables con aspectos preventivos y de reducción de riesgos que nos permitan recuperarnos lo más pronto posible. Y algo que estoy viendo también con el doctor, que estoy escuchando con el doctor Masamitsu, es la importancia que tiene la población en la recuperación de algún fenómeno que perturbe a la ciudad. Creo que entre mayor sea esta interacción entre gobierno y población y sociedad civil, podemos recuperarnos lo más pronto posible, que es uno de los fines de la resiliencia.
Mm-hmm. And concerning the institutional arrangements, the disaster risk management system previously, some years ago, had their own institutional arrangements and relationships. Now that the main focus is resilience, I wanted to know if the disaster risk management system and policies are involved into the resilience policies, or they have a lateral relationship, or how?
Bueno, es parte de lo que pretendemos con el Consejo de Resiliencia de la Ciudad de México, que muchos sectores vean el desarrollo de las construcciones, de la movilidad, del aspecto hídrico, del aspecto ambiental con miras de resiliencia. Creo que eso es una de las cosas también que nos falta como ciudad, interiorizar el concepto de resiliencia hacia otros sectores. Creo que lo estamos logrando, pero es un trabajo que lleva bastante tiempo para que cada uno de los sectores gestione sus riesgos y construya resiliencia. Creo que afinar políticas públicas que incentiven este análisis de la resiliencia de diferentes aspectos va a ser crucial en las ciudades.
Okay, thank you, Norland. Thank you to all of you. We are some minutes to finish. Before this, I want to send greetings to Doris Suaza, that I have seen you are in the room. You have collaborated too with the committee and with the Peruvian engineers institutions during previous events. Greetings to members of the disaster risk management community also in Peru, Jose Mateo, Jorge Cuenca that I mentioned, Miguel Castillo, Fiorella Martinelli, members of the committees. Thank you to all of you. I would like to, before finish, to remember some of these key messages that are in the book chapter. The link for to download the book has been put in the chat log too for everyone. It is free. And from this chapter, there are some key messages that we are going to improve with the feeding from today. One is that the disaster risk management systems are complex systems, and that the institutional frameworks to support this should be very robust and healthy. Also, that among the different components that Dr. Lind showed us, the infrastructure, the software, and within institutions, the human component is maybe the most complicated to manage with high standard of high level of capacity. And also in much countries, this requires strong anti-corruption policies. Taking advantage of the successful example from other countries is an important point as well as the importance of ensuring and retaining public trust during the disaster response time. Strengthening institutional framework is as an incentive for good execution of the assigned roles for every institution. We have discussed here also the importance to have an integrated and systematized and updated public databases of risks. And if the general disaster risk management system components are centralized at a national level, also the resilience building at local level and the local authority responsibility is of first importance. With this, I want also to finish giving thanks again to our speakers, Norland, Masamitsu, and Dr. Peche and Dr. Miles, that was not present, to the technical support from the Colegio de Ingenieros del Perú, to Lucho, our translator, Karim Salcedo, also, always Lisette Lopez, that managed all the administration and the communications for this webinar. I announced that the next month, by maybe the second week in August, we should have the next webinar, this time concerning the land use planning as a component for the disaster risk management. And with this, thank you to all people that participated in the webinar. Good night. The best for you all.